To navigate the path ahead, we've always relied on those who see things differently. They show us that the possible can be a matter of how you see it. Today, as change accelerates and complexity grows, now more than ever, we need those who can see what others can't to find our way forward. Over the years, many who see differently have shared with us how they see the future. Their vision continues to inspire us.
I learned map making in the United States Navy to help peacemakers avoid battle in the first place.
We are creating a better connected and better informed citizenry.
Jobs are going to require higher levels of thinking and decision making. So GIS is important because it helps students to be lifelong learners.
These which we can wipe off the face of the earth. That shows the power of GIS to help us change the future.
I think the absolute cutting edge of map making has to do with mapping the brain. These are going to be some of the most intricate maps humans have ever built.
Joined together with our minds and our hearts, there will be a different world, one that will be happy that your grandchildren and mine will have on into the future.
Together, we have the power to choose the way forward. We have the power to see what others can't.
Hi, I'm John Cullen. Thanks for joining Just the Facts. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at some very specific facts. We're going to look at YouTube's medical misinformation policy. We're going to look at Patreon's medical misinformation policy. We're going to take a closer look at the CDC's COVID-19 mortality numbers straight from the CDC. And we're going to visit the Johns Hopkins Michael Bloomberg School of Public Health's ESRI ArcInfo map and take a look at what's happening around the world with coronavirus. There's a number of aspects of the outbreak right now around the world that you may not be hearing on the mainstream media. And so by consulting what we see on the map, we'll be able to talk about countries like India, Poland, Hungary, China, and Japan, Thailand, Cambodia, Mongolia. There's all kinds of things happening around the world that you may not be aware of. So we're going to take a closer look at that. But before we do that, I wanted to spend some time visiting with the YouTube medical misinformation policy. A number of doctors, epidemiologists, PhDs, and governors have had their YouTube content struck because of medical misinformation violations. I've had one that was struck. And so I figured, almost like a public service announcement, it might make some sense to read these policies together. So let's do that. And then I'm going to read to you the Patreon medical misinformation policy, which is different. And I want to compare the two. And then we'll look at the mortality numbers over at the CDC. I'm John Cullen. Thanks for joining Just the Facts. Let's get started.
A couple of nights ago, I came home very late and I was having a little bit of trouble getting into my apartment. I accidentally took out a car key and I stuck it into the door and turned it and the building started up. So I drove it around for a while. I went too fast and the police pulled me over. They said, "Where do you live?" I said, "Right here."
Right now, as I'm recording this, it's Friday, April 23rd in Asia, Thursday the 22nd in New York. There are over 3 million people that have died from coronavirus worldwide. I'm looking at worldometers right now. And we're going to take a closer look at some of these numbers in a moment. The country that I've got my eye on right now is India. And I don't like what I see in India. And we're going to take a closer look at that later in the show. India right now is at 186,000, almost 187,000 people that have died. But this, I'm going to show you why I'm concerned. This is the new cases in India, and this is not good. So all the way out to the right here, India has more cases in one day than I think any country has ever had. I believe that's true. I could be wrong, but I think that's correct. And usually I don't pay a lot of attention to cases, but in this case it is a leading indicator of what to expect in India. And when I look at deaths in India, this is what I see. So more people are dying in India now than in any time during the outbreak before. So here we had, a little over 1,000 people dying, and now we've got over 2,000. So this is not good. So I'm really concerned about that. We're going to take a closer look at that later in the show. But why don't we begin with what the rules are, right? So before we start delving into content, it probably makes sense to pay a closer look at what are the rules. So let's do that. So this is the YouTube COVID-19 medical misinformation policy from their website. And I thought it would be helpful to read this together. So let's do that. COVID-19 medical misinformation policy. The safety of our creators, viewers, and partners is our highest priority. We look to each of you to help us protect this unique and vibrant community. It's important you understand our community guidelines and the role they play in our shared responsibility to keep YouTube safe. Take the time to carefully read the policy below. You can also check out this page for a full list of our guidelines. YouTube doesn't allow content about COVID-19 that poses a serious risk of egregious harm. YouTube doesn't allow content that spreads medical misinformation that contradicts local health authorities or the World Health Organization's medical information about COVID-19. This is limited to content that contradicts WHO or local health authorities' guidance on treatment, prevention, diagnosis, transmission, social distancing, and self-isolation guidelines, the existence of COVID-19. Note, YouTube's policies on COVID-19 are subject to change in response to changes to global or local health authorities' guidance on the virus. This policy was published May 20th, 2020. What this policy means for you. If you're posting content, don't post content on YouTube if it includes any of the following. And we go on to a list of treatment information here. Treatment misinformation. Content that encourages the use of home remedies, prayer, or rituals in place of medical treatment, such as consulting a doctor or going to the hospital. Okay, so as I'm going through these, I want you to think about this channel and any other channels that you watch. Are they violating any one of these points? And if I feel that I have, I'm going to let you know, but we don't encourage the use of home remedies here. In fact, I don't give any advice on this channel other than to talk to your own doctor. That's it. I don't have advice. But somebody seems to think I do. Next point, content that claims that there's a guaranteed cure for COVID-19. You won't hear that here, but if you hear it elsewhere, that's a no-no. Content that recommends use of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine for the treatment of COVID-19. So if you've got a video that recommends either of those, it's gone. They won't let it. Period. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor. Claims that ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine are effective treatments for COVID-19. Also, that's not allowed. If you think it's effective and you're going to make a video, they don't want to hear that. That's not allowed. And I don't know what's effective because I'm not a doctor. So I have no idea what's effective. Okay? Other content that discourages people from consulting a medical professional or seeking medical advice. Well, that's all I do is tell you to talk to your doctor here. Don't know about other channels. All right, let's continue. Prevention misinformation. Content that promotes prevention methods that contradict local health authorities or the WHO. Claims that there's a guaranteed prevention method for COVID-19. Claims that any medication or vaccination is a guaranteed prevention method for COVID-19. Content that recommends use of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine for the prevention of COVID-19. Claims that wearing a mask is dangerous or causes negative physical health effects. So if you make a video and it has anything about that, that's gone. You can't talk about that. Any negative physical health effect having to do with masks, that content is not allowed on YouTube. Okay? Let's be real clear here. Claims that masks do not play a role in preventing the contraction or transmission of COVID-19. Okay? Claims about COVID-19 vaccinations that contradict expert consensus from local health authorities or WHO. Claims that an approved COVID-19 vaccine will cause death, infertility, miscarriage, autism, or contraction of other infectious diseases. Claims that an approved COVID-19 vaccine will contain substances that are not on the vaccine ingredient list, such as biological matter from fetuses, e.g. fetal tissue, fetal cell lines, or animal products. Claims that an approved COVID-19 vaccine will contain substances or devices meant to track or identify those who've received it. Claims that an approved COVID-19 vaccine will alter a person's genetic makeup. Okay. Claims that COVID-19 vaccines do not reduce the risk of contracting COVID-19. Claims that any vaccine causes contraction of COVID-19. Claims that a specific population will be required by any entity except for a government to take part in vaccine trials or receive the vaccine first. That's an interesting one. Let's take a second look at this. If you make a video that says that there's a claim that a specific population will be required by any entity except for a government to take part in vaccine trials or receive the vaccine first, that video is gone. You're going to get a medical misinformation strike on that. Content that promotes the use of unapproved or homemade COVID-19 vaccines. Well, I'm in violent agreement with that one for sure. Homemade vaccines. Who the hell wants that? Instructions to counterfeit vaccine certificates or offers of sale for such documents. Wow. Boy, I understand that one too. Diagnostic misinformation. Content that promotes diagnostic methods that contradict local health authorities or the WHO. Diagnostic misinformation. Content that promotes diagnostic methods that contradict local health authorities or the WHO. Transmission information, content that promotes transmission information that contradicts local health authorities or the WHO. Content that claims that COVID-19 is not caused by a viral infection. Content that claims COVID-19 is not contagious. Content that claims that COVID-19 cannot spread in certain climates or geographies. And that's not what we claim here. We're just pointing out the number of people who've died in certain geographies, and it's different, and that's to be expected. But the extent to which it's different is somewhat remarkable, and it's changing. So we're talking about geography right now. Countries like Mongolia that had very, very few people, and at some point had none, then had like 2, now has people dying. So countries like Mongolia, Cambodia, there was no one dead in Cambodia for a long time, and now people are dying in Cambodia. So this geographic aspect of the outbreak is very real, and obviously it's something that I specialize in. But yeah, I understand what they're saying here. Content that claims that COVID-19 cannot spread in certain climates or geographies, that would be insane, and of course they don't want that. Content that claims that any group or individual has immunity to the virus or cannot transmit the virus. I don't think anybody knows that. Social distancing and self-isolation misinformation. Content that disputes the efficacy of local health authorities or WHO's guidance on physical distancing or self-isolation measures to reduce transmission. So disputing the efficacy is different from, I think, wanting to understand what other countries are doing that's similarly effective or, more effective, right? So I don't think anybody's disputing efficacy. I think people are looking for, are there other things, other measures in other countries that have been more effective? But we don't dispute the efficacy of our health authorities. We do what they say. I wear a mask and I stay as far away from people as I can. Content that denies the existence of COVID-19. And I've been debunking this lately. Denial that COVID-19 exists, claims that people have not died or gotten sick from COVID-19, claims that the virus no longer exists or that the pandemic is over. Okay, so if you make a video that says that the pandemic is over, that's not going to be good. So the pandemic, there is no over, period. Claims that the symptoms, death rates, or contagiousness of COVID-19 are less severe or equally as severe as the common cold or seasonal flu. We don't make those claims here either. Be careful on other channels, but we don't talk about that at all. Seasonal flu, common cold or seasonal flu. Claims that the symptoms of COVID-19 are never severe. We don't talk about that either. Here are some examples of content that's not allowed on YouTube. Denial that COVID-19 exists. Claims that people have not died from COVID-19. Claims that any vaccine is a guaranteed prevention method for COVID-19. Claims that a specific treatment or medicine is a guaranteed cure for COVID-19. Claims that hydroxychloroquine saves people from COVID-19. Promotion of MMS, Miracle Mineral Solution, for the treatment of COVID-19. Claims that certain people have immunity to COVID-19 due to their race or nationality, encouraging taking home remedies instead of getting medical treatment when sick, discouraging people from consulting a medical professional if they're sick, content that claims that holding your breath can be used as a diagnostic test for COVID-19, videos alleging that if you avoid Asian food, you won't get the coronavirus. That's interesting. Videos alleging that setting off fireworks can clear the air of the virus and will prevent the spread of the virus. Videos that allege that setting off fireworks can clean the air of the virus and will prevent the spread. That's almost worth doing just for the goof of it. I mean, what kind of... Somebody did that? Unbelievable. Claims that COVID-19 is caused by radiation from 5G networks. Those videos will not be tolerated. Videos alleging that the COVID-19 test is the cause of the virus. Okay. Claims that countries with hot climates will not experience the spread of the virus. Examples. Videos alleging that social distancing and self-isolation are not effective in reducing the spread of the virus. Claims that wearing a mask causes oxygen levels to drop to dangerous levels. Not allowed to say that. Claims that masks cause lung cancer or brain damage. Claims that wearing a mask gives you COVID-19. Claims that COVID-19 vaccine will kill people who receive it. Claims that the COVID-19 vaccine will be used as a means of population reduction. Videos claiming that the COVID-19 vaccine will contain fetal tissue. Claims that the flu vaccine causes contraction of COVID-19. Claims that COVID-19 vaccines are not effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19. Claims that the COVID-19 vaccine causes contraction of other infectious diseases or makes people more vulnerable to contraction of other infectious diseases. Claims that the COVID-19 vaccines contain a microchip or tracking device. Will not be tolerated, not allowed on YouTube. Claims that achieving herd immunity through natural infection is safer than vaccinating the population. Will not be allowed on YouTube. Let me read that one again. Claims that achieving herd immunity through natural infection is safer than vaccinating the population will not be allowed on YouTube. Claims that COVID-19 never causes serious symptoms or hospitalization. Claims that the death rate from the seasonal flu is higher than the death rate of COVID-19. Let me read that one again and note the term seasonal. Claims that the death rate from the seasonal flu is higher than the death rate of COVID-19. That's not allowed on YouTube. And we don't really talk that much about seasonal flu here. We talk about past year's seasonal flu, but we don't compare seasonal flu with COVID-19 here. Claims that people are immune to the virus based on their race. Claims that children cannot or do not contract COVID-19. Claims that there have not been cases or deaths in countries where cases or deaths have been confirmed by local health authorities or the WHO. Okay, so the videos that I've done, I've pointed out countries where there were no people dead. Now, the only real major country where no one's died, I think, still is Laos. Months and months and months ago was Laos and Cambodia. In fact, I think even Vietnam had very few people for quite some time. But then each one of these countries started to experience deaths. So right now, I think Laos may be the only one. But if you make a claim that there's no deaths in a country where deaths have been confirmed, that's not allowed. And so that's why I've been very accurate with the maps as one of the pioneers, one of the founders of the system, one of the key architects. Diagnostic misinformation. Content that promotes diagnostic methods that contradict local health authorities or the WHO. So by diagnostic methods, I'm assuming here they're talking about if you have content that promotes some other method of determining whether or not somebody has it or doesn't, so something other than a PCR test. And I don't know what kind of test they're doing. If they're still doing cultures, I have no idea if cultures are still done. But nobody's promoting anything other than what the CDC wants you to do. Content that promotes transmission information that contradicts local health authorities or the WHO. Content that claims that COVID-19 is not caused by viral infection. Content that claims COVID-19 is not contagious. Content that claims that COVID-19 cannot spread in certain climates or geographies. content that claims that any group or individual has immunity to the virus or cannot transmit the virus. Social distancing and self-isolation misinformation, content that disputes the efficacy of local health authorities or WHO's guidance on physical distancing or self-isolation measures to reduce the transmission of COVID-19. Content that denies the existence. So I don't dispute the efficacy of local health authorities' guidance on masks or distancing, but I think there might be more stuff. So I'm sure that stuff's effective, and we don't dispute that at all. I'm just wondering, are there other things that other countries are doing that are also effective that the states haven't done? And I only ask that question because I look at a place like New York, and I see that New York has so many more people dead than Japan. And I know Japan did physical distancing, and I know Japan did the masks. So they did the same, still, Japan wore masks and Japan did social distancing. New York wore masks and New York did social distancing. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the difference, right? Why does New York have so many more people dead than Japan? And I don't know. So I'm not disputing the efficacy. I'm just asking questions. Content that denies the existence, content that denial that COVID exists, claims that people have not gotten sick, claims that the virus no longer exists or that the pandemic is over. So don't be the first video to declare the pandemic over. That's not going to make it. Claims that the symptoms, death rates, or contagiousness of COVID-19 are less severe, equally as severe as the common cold or seasonal flu. Claims that the symptoms of COVID-19 are never severe. There are some exceptions, though, at YouTube. So here's the exceptions. If the primary purpose is educational, that's what we do here. Documentary, that's what we do here. Scientific, that's what we do here. Or artistic in nature. I'm not quite artistic. We may allow content that includes harassment. Oh, okay, so these are the harassment rules, I see. These exceptions are not a free pass to harass someone. Some examples include debates related to high-profile officials or leaders, content featuring debates or discussions of topical issues concerning individuals who have high positions of power, like high-profile government officials or CEOs of major multinational corporations, scripted performances, insults made in the context of an artistic medium such as a scripted satire, stand-up comedy, or music, such as a diss track. Note, this exception is not a free pass to harass someone and claim I was joking. Well, we do a lot of satire here. It's not scripted. Stand-up comedy is not scripted, but harassment, education, or awareness, content that features actual or simulated harassment for documentary purposes or with willing participants to combat cyberbullying or raise awareness. We take a harder line on content that maliciously insults someone based on their protected group status, regardless of whether or not they're a high-profile person. All right, so these are the rules about debates of topical issues concerning individuals who have positions of power, like high-profile government officials, like Fauci, I guess. All right, so let's now look at the Patreon policies on COVID-19 related medical misinformation. And this is from Patreon. So we were just reviewing YouTube's policies. These are Patreon's policies. Since the beginning of 2020, the world has been united in the struggle to contain and defeat the COVID-19 pandemic. In recent months, as governments around the world have begun approving vaccines and other medicines to combat the spread and severity of COVID-19, we have also observed an increase in online activity promoting medical misinformation. We've been inspired by the actions that first responders and health officials have taken all over the world in order to save people's lives, and want to ensure that Patreon is not supporting efforts to miseducate patrons or the public at large on COVID-19 prevention, mitigation, and treatment. Starting today, Patreon is updating its community guidelines to address content spreading misinformation on COVID-19. Patreon will not allow creators that repeatedly use unfounded or debunked theories to argue against broadly supported public health measures on COVID-19. Examples of this include repeated posts that advocate drinking bleach, using UV lights inside of your body as an effective alternative to a vaccine. As always, we're going to work with creators directly to bring their content back within our guidelines. In the weeks ahead, Patreon will introduce fact-checking resources for posts discussing COVID-19, designed to help creators and patrons access trusted information. In addition, our team will add post-level moderation tools to address each situation with the nuanced response it deserves. To be clear, this policy update will not impact creators making content that debates the merits of or expresses skepticism around public health recommendations. We will always encourage the broadest dialogue possible amongst creators and their patrons. Our trust and safety team will work directly with creators to ensure that their content does not contain unfounded or debunked assertions on COVID-19 that would dissuade the public from taking preventative or responsive public health measures like a vaccine. If you're a creator who's unsure of whether or not your activity on Patreon is within our community guidelines, please feel free to send us an email at guidelines@patreon. While the COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented disruption to lives across the globe, we're hopeful that we may be turning a corner in this crisis. As global health officials and emergency responders work to contain and end the epidemic, we're optimistic about the opportunities in store for creators in 2021 and beyond. We look forward to continuing our work to keep them safe and secure in a post-COVID world. All right, so these are two different approaches. One is from YouTube and the other is from Patreon. What we're going to take a look at next, the CDC's mortality website for COVID-19. So what I like to do is to use the authoritative sources as often as I possibly can. So if I can use the CDC's website, we're just looking at the numbers. We're not offering any information here. So there's no misinformation, disinformation, or information. This is just me looking at the CDC's website and telling you what I see. And I could be wrong, right? That's one of the topics I wanted to look at was the SARS outbreak from 2002. And I thought I would read this to you because, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. The 2002 to 2004 SARS outbreak was an epidemic involving severe acute respiratory syndrome caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, SARS-CoV or SARS-CoV-1. The outbreak was first identified in Guangdong, China, November 16th, 2002. Over 8,000 people from 29 different countries and territories were infected, and at least 774 died worldwide. The major part of the outbreak lasted about 8 months, since the World Health Organization declared SARS contained July 5th, 2003. However, several SARS cases were reported until May 2004. In December 2019, SARS-CoV-2, a new strain of coronavirus, closely related to the one that causes SARS, was discovered in Wuhan, China. This new strain causes COVID-19, a disease which is spread worldwide, leading to an ongoing pandemic that's killed millions. So the original SARS outbreak appears to have killed 774 people, and there were about 8,000 cases. Okay? Then we had MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, also known as the camel flu, is a viral respiratory infection caused by the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome-related coronavirus, MERS-CoV. Symptoms may range from none to mild to severe, Typical symptoms include fever, cough, diarrhea, and shortness of breath. The disease is typically more severe in those with other health problems. MERS-CoV is a coronavirus believed to be originally from bats. However, humans are typically infected from camels, either during direct contact or indirectly. Spread between humans typically requires close contact with an infected person. Its spread is uncommon outside of hospitals. Thus, its risk to the global population is currently deemed to be fairly low. Diagnosis is by RRT-PCR testing of blood and respiratory samples. As of 2020, there is no specific vaccine or treatment for the disease, but a number are being developed. The World Health Organization recommends that those who come in contact with camels wash their hands and do not touch sick camels. They also recommend that camel-based food products be appropriately cooked. Treatments that help with the symptoms and support body functioning may be used. The first identified case occurred June 2012 in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and most cases have occurred in the Arabian Peninsula. Over 2,500 cases have been reported as of January 2021, including 45 cases in the year 2020. About 35% of those who are diagnosed with the disease die from it. Larger outbreaks have occurred in South Korea in 2015 and in Saudi Arabia in 2018. So that's MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. So these are sort of the three big coronaviruses. The original SARS-CoV-1, the MERS-CoV, and now the SARS-CoV-2. All right, we're going to go take a look at, let's see, some maps and stuff. But again, I want to call your attention to India. More people are dying in India right now than at any other time during the pandemic. And the number of deaths are up, the number of cases are up. It's just not good. Canada. Canada has had more people die in the past 6 months or so than they did at the beginning of the outbreak. So the second wave of this in Canada has been worse than the first wave, according to the data. And this is daily deaths. But the thing now, again, I've said in the past, I don't pay that much attention to cases. But at this point, when I look at where Canada is now with deaths, the question is, okay, are they trailing away and going away? And when I'm going to look at cases. No, you're going to have more people die in Canada. That's a prediction, okay? So you've got, here's your daily deaths. And so daily deaths were trailing, but now you've got more cases. Cases are picking up in Canada. I'm afraid more people are going to die. So whereas this looked like it might be trailing away and going away, the fact that there's a whole bunch of new cases is not good in Canada. So I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better based on this data. Again, I could be wrong. There was a testimony from Dr. Peter McCullough testifying to the Texas Senate Health and Human Services Committee. And this happened back in March 12th, about 5-6 weeks ago. And it has about 250,000 views. Very interesting video. Really articulate doctor. I want to take a closer look at that, and we'll talk more about that in a future show. I reached out to Michael Warby. He's the department head at the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology College of Science at, Arizona State University or something like that, I guess. University of Arizona. There you go. So he's the professor at University of Arizona who talks about the Spanish flu, talks about the Alaska thing, talks about the accidental escape. And I reached out to him, but I haven't heard anything. So let's go to the browser All right, so we were just talking about India. And let's go take a look at some of these other countries. So one of the things I'm looking at right now are new cases. And India, with 332,000 new cases. Yesterday, 315,000 new cases in India. 2 days ago, 294,000 cases. That's 300,000 cases in a day for 3 days. That's 1 million cases in 3 days. And it's not good. And with India's population, this thing can get real bad real fast. So when we look at the total number of people dead, the USA has the most with 582,000. Brazil, 374,000. Excuse me, 378,000 in Brazil. Mexico, 212,466. Then India with 182,000. But if India keeps adding cases at this kind of rate, India could eclipse the United States in deaths if they don't get this under control. Let's go take a closer look at Brazil and see what's happening in Brazil. So Brazil has 381, almost 382,000 people that have died. And this is their new cases. Now, cases here in Brazil are coming off this peak, which was March 25th. So March 25th, they registered the most cases in a day ever in Brazil, and that was 97,586. Since then, their cases per day is going down, 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 down. That's good. Now we go check on deaths. All right, so they had peak deaths, it appears, about April the 6th, 4,211. So 4,211 people died in Brazil, April the 6th. In the past 2 weeks, these numbers are coming down. 3,774. Okay, 3,481. That's good. That's a good sign. And we want to see this continuing down and trending down. And if we look at the cases now, the cases are trending down. So hopefully this will continue. And we will achieve depletion of susceptibles in Brazil. Okay. Let's go see where else I was concerned about. New cases. Poland. Poland is a mess right now. Poland has 64,000 people dead. That's a lot. Now, the good news in Poland is their second wave appears to be trailing. Okay, so they peaked here, 35,000 cases. March 26th and April 1st. And since then, their daily cases have been coming down. Let's go see about how many people are dying. Yeah. So peak deaths in Poland appeared to be April the 8th of 2021. And if you look back in April of last year, Poland didn't really have a bad outbreak last April, right? April, May, June, you don't see a whole lot of people dying here. And then in October, this thing takes off in Poland, right? So we're seeing different outbreak dynamics, I guess you would call it, in different countries. I don't know why. I have no idea why. No idea why, but different shape. So here in Poland, the deaths peaked April the 8th. And now your deaths per day are coming down, down, down the trend. And hopefully that will continue. Another way to look at this is the number of deaths per million in the population. And when we sort the data this way, deaths per 1 million population, the countries that have 2791, 2700 per million, 2500 per million, these are the sort of your worst performers. 2,000 deaths per million and up. So let's see who these countries are. Gibraltar, Hungary. So Hungary's death per million is not good. This is where Belgium was about 6 months ago. So Hungary has 26,000 people that have died, but the number of people that have died versus their population is the worst of, the major countries in Western Europe. And when you look at the new cases, the good news is, again, it appears that they have peaked. And here are your deaths. And it appears that their deaths are also coming off the peak. It looks like they had peak deaths April 7th. And since then, the daily death count is just dropping, which is great. But Hungary is taking it hard as far as the number of people died versus the population in the country. The Czech Republic, what we used to call Czechoslovakia, almost 29,000 people have died in the Czech Republic. Again, their cases are coming down off of a third peak. This is the W-shaped outbreak with 3 peaks and valleys in between. And then here on their deaths in Czechoslovakia, same thing. It looks like they had peak deaths back in March 9th and March 16th, and now their deaths are trailing down, which is great news. But again, the number of people who've died versus the population in Czechoslovakia is brutal. We talked about San Marino before, didn't even know it was a country. Bosnia and Herzegovina, same thing. There are over 2,000 per million have died. Montenegro, a beautiful country. Bulgaria, Macedonia. This is like a region here. Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Montenegro, Bulgaria, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Slovakia, Belgium. All right, so we had been talking about Belgium early on, and that the number of people who've died per million in Belgium was very high. 23,867 have died in Belgium, and the new cases, looks like they had a second little peak there, but they're coming off of that. Wow, they had 20,000 a day in Belgium. It's just not that big a country. And here's the deaths in Belgium. So they had their original peak, which was ruthless and brutal, appeared to achieve depletion of susceptibles, but then had a second wave. And a second peak, November 11th, came off that peak. 127 deaths on December 30th, have been coming down a little rise here, back in the 50s and 60s here. That's in Belgium. Slovenia, Italy, the UK, then Brazil, then the USA. So as far as deaths per million, the USA, Brazil, the UK, Italy are kind of neck and neck. Let's go to the UK, see how you guys are doing. 127,345 people in the United Kingdom have died out of 4,400,000 cases. That's about 3%, roughly. So 3% of 4.4 million is going to yield about this number of deaths, roughly. Most of the other countries, like the United States, are hovering below 2%. The UK is at about 3%. Here's your daily new cases in the UK. Good news here is your cases are coming way off your peak. Peak was back January 8th. Big numbers here, 55,000, 67,900. But now you guys are only adding 2,500 or so cases per day. A little over 2,000, 3,000 in here. So that number of cases per day versus 50, 60,000 is a big difference. Let's go look at the deaths. So in the UK, the deaths have come down beautifully. 31, 22, April 21st, 22 people died in the UK. That's phenomenal. I mean, you guys are almost at zero. Compared to where you were just back in January 26th, 1,633 people died in a day. Right? Joe Biden was sworn in, what was it, January 20th? Right? So he's been in office for 90 days now. And then in the 90 days that he's been in office, the UK has gone as far as deaths. So, I mean, if you're in the UK, this has got to be good news. I don't know what they're telling you on the news, but this looks good. I'm not allowed to tell you the pandemic's over, but this certainly looks like where you'd want to be headed, right? So down, down, down. Let's get that number close to 0. And then somebody else will make a video telling you that the thing is over. I'm not allowed to do that. All right, so that's the UK. Brazil. How is Brazil faring? It looks like they're coming off their peak on the cases. And then we go to deaths. Yeah, I'm hoping this was the peak in Brazil. So here we see over 4,000 people a day, April 6th, just a couple weeks ago. What we're hoping now is that this just continues to head down, 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 down. But there's no telling. There's no telling what will happen. The cases are a good indicator at this stage. So at this point, when I see the cases going down, that would lead me to believe that if that continues that trend, the deaths will go down and continue. So that's good news there. Another way we can look at this is to sort by population. And the thing that most people find it very hard to believe is that the country with the largest population doesn't even have 5,000 people dead. So there aren't 5,000 people dead in China, according to all the authoritative sources, according to Worldometers, the Johns Hopkins map, according to everything. There's not 5,000 people dead in China. Well, I'm not disputing anything. It's what it says. So for whatever that's worth. 186,000, almost 187,000 dead in India. The third most populated country on earth, has the most number of dead. And then Indonesia. Indonesia has only 44,000 people dead. That's less than New York. It's less than California. And they've got a population of 275 million people in Indonesia. So 275 million people and fewer dead than California, fewer dead than New York. We're just curious, what did they do that was effective? Same thing in Pakistan. Pakistan's got a big population. Pakistan has only 17, just shy of 17,000 people that have died, with a population of 224 million people. Gavin Newsom isn't curious about that? I am. I think my audience is. You know, did Pakistan do something? We don't know the answer. We're just asking questions because we think, you know, this looks pretty good compared to the 584,000. You know, this looks better to me. I could be wrong, but it looks better. And then we go to Nigeria. Nigeria is the 7th most populated country on the planet. Has over 200 million people, 210 million people in Nigeria. Right? So with 210 million people, you would expect they should have more dead than, you know, New York. And no, Nigeria has fewer people dead than Long Island. Nigeria has fewer people dead than Connecticut. It's very difficult to understand how that is a year into this. Same thing with Bangladesh. So Bangladesh, with 10,000 people, 10,781 that have died, and a population of 166 million, that's fewer people than they have dead in Ohio. And Bangladesh has got 166 million people. Ohio doesn't have 166 million. But Ohio has more dead than Bangladesh. Then we get to Russia. Russia, 107,000 people are dead in Russia. 213,000 are dead in Mexico. But Bangladesh has a bigger population. Nigeria has a bigger population. So this is kind of the way I look at things. When I look at Russia with 107,000 dead, and I look at Mexico with 213,000 dead, and I say, but Bangladesh has more people than Russia. Bangladesh has more people than Mexico. Nigeria has more people than any of them. And Nigeria has 2,000 dead. Now, Japan doesn't have 10,000 people dead, and Japan has 126 million people in their population. So with a population of 126 million in Japan, right? Japan only, they don't yet have 10,000 people dead. Now, Ethiopia, another country, right, with 3,400 people, less than 3,500 have died in Ethiopia. A lot of new cases. It's not like they're not tracking here, right? You can't say they're not counting. They're counting. They're keeping track of it. And then here's your daily deaths. And you see, now this is not good. See how this is peaking? This is not good news. This means Ethiopia has been able to keep this thing at bay for the most part for a year. But this, to me, this is a cause for alarm, like India. Somebody needs to get on the phone with these health ministers. I mean, this is not good in Ethiopia. They are headed in the wrong direction. And I'm not a doctor. I'm a data guy. That's the direction it's headed, is up and to the right, and that's not where we want to go. So that's what I see in Ethiopia. The Philippines. The Philippines has more people than Germany. Okay, the Philippines, population-wise, 110 million people in the Philippines. It's bigger than Germany. It's bigger than the UK. It's bigger than France. So if the Philippines is bigger than the UK, why does the Philippines only have 16,000 people dead? There's more people in the Philippines than in the UK. So how do they have 16,000 dead? Now, I don't know the answer to any of this stuff. I just have awkward questions. So this is the Philippines. They peaked in maximum cases April 2nd, and now cases have been coming down since then. That's good. Then we go to deaths. About the same type of pattern, a little sporadic, but you see peak deaths here, April 9th, and now they're coming down. So they're tracking. But again, you look at a country like the Philippines compared to the UK, and, the Philippines have embarrassed the UK. Forget about Japan. Egypt has 100 million people. 12,866 have died. Population of 103 million people in Egypt. It's a big country. There's more people in Egypt than any country in Western Europe. So here's Egypt as number 14. And if you go up, there's not a Western European country in here. The biggest Western European country is Germany. Right? So if Germany is the largest country in Western Europe, and Germany has 81,700 people have died in Germany, and it's the biggest country. I then look at countries bigger than Germany, like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, that's only reporting 752 deaths. And there I want to know from the WHO, is that real? And then we go to Vietnam. And Vietnam has more people than Germany, more people than the UK, and Vietnam only has 35 people dead. And Anderson Cooper doesn't seem to think this is news. Rachel Maddow doesn't seem to think that this is a story here. There's no interest in that. Again, I have no idea how. All right, now I need to show you what's going on in Thailand and Cambodia. Thailand is starting to get cases. Now, it's not as bad as India, but it's ramping and it's not looking good. So these are the new cases in Thailand. Look here on the left. This was the original outbreak. This is March of 2020. And this was how many cases Thailand was registering. And then there was nothing, right? And not that many people died in Thailand through this whole part of the outbreak. But now Thailand is registering over 1,000 cases a day, 1,500 a day. Right now, is it too soon to say that they're coming off the peak? Yes, it's too soon to say. It's hard to tell. Is this going to continue or come down? I don't know. But this is not good. So right now, people in Thailand they're getting scared because they've been waiting a year. There was no tourism. And now all of a sudden it's hitting Thailand. Now, daily deaths, They've only had 4 people die in one day was the most they've ever had. But it's adding up. And now Thailand has over 100 people that have died. And for a long time, they were, holding at 60, right? Here's Tanzania. Still 21. Joe Magufuli passed away. Still 21 people dead. Myanmar. Again, Myanmar has a population that's significant. 54.7 million people in Myanmar, and only 3,200 have died. Kenya, only 2,560 have died, and the population of Kenya is 54.7 million. So I'm looking at these countries compared to places like New York and California and saying, Kenya's bigger than California, but California's got way more people dead than Kenya. How did that happen? I don't know the answer. South Korea, only 1,800 people, a little over 1,800 have died in South Korea on a population of 51 million. So you go to South Korea, population of over 50 million. That's more than California, more than New York. And yet, with that type of population, they only had 1,800 people pass away in South Korea. Don't know why. Uganda has 341 people that have died. Spain, 77,000, and Uganda has more people than Spain. Right? We're sorted by population here. So what we're looking at are like-sized countries right next to each other so that we get to see the Ugandas, so that we get to see the South Koreas. I'm looking for these outliers. I'm looking for countries with a similar population to Spain. Right? Spain's got 77,500 people that have died. Argentina, 60,000 people. Colombia, 70,000 people in Colombia. South Africa, 54,000 people. 120,000 in Italy. And Thailand has 117 and more people than all of them. And Vietnam is 35 and more people than Germany, more people than Turkey, more people than Iran. So these are the outliers. I'm just fascinated by it. I'm just kind of curious why nobody wants to talk to those people and find out what's going on there. Canada, we spoke about Canada a little bit earlier. What we're seeing in Canada, almost 24,000 died. But the problem in Canada is the new cases, right? We're up here again. So we had the early outbreak. This is your summer of 2020. Then peak new cases, 11,400, 11,000 cases a day in Canada. And now the deaths haven't caught up. So I'm afraid to be the bearer of bad news. And I don't like to make predictions, but you've got way more cases in the last 2-3 weeks, and the deaths haven't caught your cases in Canada. So be prepared for some bad news. All right, let me take you guys to the map, and let's just take a quick look at what it looks like from a GIS perspective. And I wanted to see what's happening in Michigan. So I'm going to click on Michigan. 18,000 people are dead in Michigan, according to the system. So that's where Michigan is. Here's your daily cases in Michigan. The original peak was November 27th with 17,000 per day. But there's like a secondary peak here. Those are cases. Now we look at deaths. And deaths here, second peak, and now you're in your third peak of deaths. But it looks like the cases are coming down now. So hopefully the deaths will continue to come down. But that's where you are in Michigan at the moment. Let's see. Here's Minnesota. Minnesota, daily deaths. Looks like they caught up with some accounting here. So it looks like Minnesota really had its peak back in November. Cases right now, cumulative cases. There we are, daily cases. So a secondary peak here in Minnesota. The deaths are kind of tracking with that. I don't expect any surprises there. And that's about it for the states. what I wanted to show you is for the longest time, Cambodia had no one dead. For the longest time. And see how the map is not resetting. I want the map to reset, and it's not. Let's go click on Shanghai just for fun. Shanghai has 7 people dead. And if I scroll down to China, you'll see that China barely has over 100,000 cases. So, although this was presented as the China virus, Shanghai, with a population of 24 million, only has 7 people dead, according to Johns Hopkins. And if I go to Beijing, still 9. So we've got 9 dead in Beijing and 7 in Shanghai, 2 major cities in China. And all of China has 4,845 dead. So what that means is that there are states in the United States that have more people dead than China. But the other dynamic that we're seeing here in Asia now is this outbreak in Thailand. We're seeing an outbreak in Cambodia. So Cambodia's got 59 people dead now. Cambodia had no one dead for a long, long time. Now there's 8,193 cases in Cambodia. There we go. I want to see the chart. So those are daily deaths. Daily cases, daily deaths. No one died in Cambodia until March 11th, 2021 is when they had their first death. One person died, and then another, and then another. But until March 11th, no one had died in Cambodia. And I think Laos is still at 0. Yep, Laos, 94 cases, no one's dead. But Mongolia had been at 0 for a long time. And now Mongolia has people dying. 61 people have died in Mongolia. They've got 26,690 something cases. Let's go look at Mongolia. So here's Mongolia. Huge border with China. Huge border. And when we go to Mongolia, 61 are dead now. And you see they had their first death December 29th. Had their first person die. And yeah, see, this is not good. So Mongolia is like peaking in new cases right now. 61 people have died. No one had died there before. And now the outbreak is hitting Mongolia, fully a year into this thing. I don't have any explanations for this at all. I'm just noticing these things are happening at strange times, right? Countries like Mongolia and Cambodia that had no one dead for a long, long time are now starting to experience the outbreak. Thailand had been sitting like at 59, 60 people dead for a very long time, now has twice that, and we just saw more and more cases. India, major outbreaks. So different parts of the world are going through very different portions of the outbreak. I guess, it's affecting different people in different parts of the world differently. I'm simply trying to figure out, are there things that some countries are doing that others aren't? Here's Burma, Myanmar. 3,200 people have died. Here you see that their deaths have trailed away. Looks like they had peak deaths back in October in Myanmar. So that's good. And then we want to see cases. They don't seem to be getting a whole lot of new cases. So hopefully Myanmar doesn't have a whole lot more trouble. 3,200 people that have died with a population of over 50 million is remarkable. Way better than California. Right? So how did they do that? I have no idea. None. So that's where we stand. Today, April the 22nd, 23rd, based on where you are. Thanks for joining. I'm John Cullen. This is Just the Facts.
How you like me now? Does that make you love me, baby? Does that make you on me, baby? Does that make you love me?